Hey everybody, Freaky Boy here. Welcome back to Big Picture Tarot. Today we are talking about the very first card of the Major Arcana, the Fool. Before we get started, I do want to apologize for the delay in getting this video out. I had some family in town and for like a week, so I wasn't able to work on anything. I also have a cold, so I've been getting over that. I'm still not quite over it yet, so you'll hear coughing, sniffing, all those sorts of fun cold sounds that we all know and love to hate, or just plain hate. Excuse me. Also, do you like my ruggedness I've got going on? Yeah. So fun fact, if you hit your knee on the side of it real hard, twice on your desk, you will pass out. And you'll get dizzy first, and you'll try to crawl from this chair into the floor, and you'll pass out on the way down and land on your face and get rug burn and a black eye. So, don't do that. But I'm better now. And so now I'm ready to get back into talking about the tarot. So, the Fool is easily the most important card of the tarot itself. And I don't necessarily mean that in somehow the cards are more important together. They all at times rise in importance and fall in importance depending on where you are in your life and in your own journey. I say most important because it is the most representative card. It not only does it represent as the first card of its suit, the entire Major Arcana, it also represents the tarot as a whole, because the tarot is about the experience of being, and the Fool represents your higher self, your soul, your deeper self, your true self, whatever you want to call that. That's what the soul represents. It's the you that does the experiencing. It's the you that is. It is the you that becomes through the experience of being. It is that aspect of you, and that aspect obviously is affected. It develops itself. It becomes, and the story, as I said in the Major Arcana overview video, the Fool, the Major Arcana is about becoming, and the Minor Arcana is, of course, about the worldly experiences that the Fool goes through. So the Fool is really the pure potential. Also, generally, when you open up a new tarot deck, the Fool is what greets you. I know that's a practical sort of what they put first card, but the Fool is kind of the first card of the tarot, if you think of a first card. Excuse me, even though I didn't start with it in my series, because I wanted to start with Minor Arcana. Excuse me. So, the Fool, why is it called the Fool? Why not something else? The Fool, that name gives the sense that it's a very risky card, because the Fool represents someone whole and complete, because remember, it becomes the world at the end, but the world and the Fool are the same card. It's just one has been considered and analyzed and has become and understood, has been changed by being an incarnate being, by being at all, rather than just being eternal. You know, now it's finite and ephemeral, and something happens through that experience. The Fool then is the whole self, but it's the self not yet considered, and that journey of becoming, that idea that you're going to change, things are going to happen to you, and things are not always going to be pleasant. That's risky and often considered foolish, and that's kind of where the name comes from. The Fool also represents being absolutely yourself. It's got that page quality to it of, not only is this the true you, this is who you are. You're going to be you, consequences be damned. This is the self that isn't yet, hasn't really been pressured by society or peer pressure to be something that it isn't, to put on a persona, a mask, something else, to act in ways that it doesn't want to. In that sense, the Fool, in terms of the timeline of the Major Arcana, is kind of the birth, the new self, all that potential. You know, a young child is just themselves first. They'll learn things to do and not to do. You know, generally you tell them how not to hurt themselves, and that's not generally a bad societal pressure. You know, don't hurt yourself, because you know you might die, and you got a little. We hope you get a little more out of life than 5 seconds. So. But there's that trueness of the self. So if you look at the cards, especially I want to focus on the Witch's Tarot card, I like this depiction a little better, is that, you'll see the Fool looking up, but the Fool is walking right along a cliff, and that's very dangerous. Like, what if he falls? And it's kind of the idea that the falling would be the actual journey. That's where you see the Fool stepping off into the harshness of the world, the animal reality, the deeper self, and developing of the crocodile. the Fool in the Witch's Tarot is walking along the cliffside because the Fool is being themselves truly. They have no doubt in themselves. Like, um, they're not afraid to walk by the edge because they know not to fall off. They know what they're doing, but they don't have to sit there and think about it and like watch every step. They trust in themselves. There's a deep and true trust in themselves that comes through in this card. If you ever get in a reading, I've gotten a reading for me, and this card is kind of like saying, take a risk, be true to yourself. Don't worry about, your circumstances so much. Do you, as the saying goes. And I recently read an article saying why that phrase is terrible, but I don't care because it's good here, so there you go. You'll notice in almost every deck, the Fool has an animal companion. And I love the little doggy in this one because the dog is also running along the cliff's edge. You see that the dog is not standing still. The dog is actively in motion, and you can get a sense, especially if you've seen a little dog like this, just running and flitting about. It is the Fool. The Major Arcana represents the inner self as an animal. And, it's our animal self, our instincts, the deeper self, the subconscious part that we don't truly understand yet, that we will, though, through the experience of the Major Arcana, and through that journey, that timeline. And I like this dog because it's doing the same thing as the Fool. It's just being itself. It's being a dog. And it's running along the cliffside, too, but it knows what it's doing. It may make a mistake. It may fall and get hurt, but that's part of life. It's willing to make mistakes, to learn, and to be. It is taking that risk. Sometimes you say, well, you might get hurt. Don't be foolish. Don't get hurt. That's part of being a fool. You got to take the risk. That's the beauty of it. That's the power of this card. This is your true self. This is you, being you, no matter what. And being willing to do things. Like I said, take a risk. That's a big message of this card. Now let's look at the number of the Fool. The Fool is the first card of the Major Arcana, but unlike the Aces, which are of course ones, which I often call them by accident, the Fool is number 0. And 0 is nothingness, but it's also everything. And that seems strange if I'm saying it's nothing and yet it's everything. But that's the paradox of nothingness. If something is everything, there's nothing from which it can be distinguished, and therefore it is nothing. Because it's everything. It's that same sense. That's the same quality of the 0. And the same quality of the Fool. And I think that's the beauty of the Fool being a 0. And because it's nothingness, it falls anywhere in the tarot, not just in the Major Arcana, where it makes a little more sense in terms of the story being told. The Fool can go between an Ace and a 2. It can go between a 2 and a 3. The higher self is always there, always present, doing, being, learning. And it's a reminder that sometimes you're going to make mistakes, and sometimes life's going to be hard. But what are you getting out of it? Remember the Fool's journey, and we'll see when we look at the world, which is, the Fool from the other side, analyze, synthesize, change, transform. It's the Fool that has become. Why the Fool wants to do that? The Fool isn't afraid. It may be scary, but you got to take a risk. You also see, as I said before, the Fool has a staff with a bag on the end. The staff, Rachel Pollack points out in her book, 78 Degrees of Wisdom. I always say 28. Or at least I never get that number right. 78 Degrees of Wisdom. The wand is actually the staff is actually a wand, a tool of the will, of fire. It's the Fool's own intention, but the Fool doesn't realize it hasn't yet. It does have it; it's there, but he doesn't know he hasn't yet. And the bag on the end is a bag of experiences, and the Fool is not yet processed those experiences, has not become, even though they have had the experiences to become. And it's very interesting, and Rachel Pollack doesn't really point this out, and I think there's an important part that the bag is hanging on the stick. Not only are the typical, it just makes it easier to carry a bag over your shoulder like that. The bag is attached to the stick because it is through the will that the experiences have happened. It is through your driving, your initiative, that you have experienced anything at all. And that you will be changed by those experiences. We're going to see that a lot in the second row when we look more at the inner world, especially justice. We're going to see where the will and the experiences kind of come together and become you. And you're going to... It's powerful that the bag of experiences is hanging from the wand that he's carrying so nonchalantly. He doesn't realize he has it, doesn't know his experiences are going to change him yet. He's just doing things. He's the Fool. Finally, there's a little white flower in his hand. You can't really see it there because it blends into the cloud, but you can see it much better in person. Sorry you're not here. The white flower is a rose, and the rose, of course, represents innocence, but innocence in the sense of purity, of the idea, an older idea, I think, of virginity, not the modern, have you had sex yet? Of virginity, which is dumb. I hate it. Don't do that. Just, virginity is not a thing. Um, the idea of virginity and some things that I've read that I like more, that makes more sense, is the idea that you have not yet chosen for yourself. You have not yet chosen to give yourself over to somebody. Not just sexually, but I mean like in love, in marriage. It's the idea that instead of you experiencing things, just, to have the experience, you're now choosing something for yourself. You're now kind of almost limiting your options because you're focusing, you're giving yourself over to it. If it's the idea in sort of the Astara Beltane era of the Wheel of the Year, if you're pagan or Wiccan, of the goddess understanding that she wants to be with the god, that she is now losing her virginity, and which she really truly does, I think, on Beltane, being about the big sex holiday and the maypole and all that. It's not that she probably hasn't had sex before and she hasn't, had sex with the god. It's that now it means something more than a sexual experience. She's giving part of herself over to him rather than just experiencing him and letting him experiencing her. There's now an exchange. There's something more going on that we see in the fruitfulness of the earth, of course. So, it's a really profound thing, and it's that idea of virginity that I think the Fool captures. And especially in that rose, I think the Fool could very much be called the Virgin. And I think, as the world has developed, I'm kind of glad it hasn't been, because I think that would have skewed its meaning of someone, that ain't had sex yet. I don't, like, if you've lost your virginity, was it really as big a deal as you made it out to be? Because it wasn't for me. Mostly it was fun, but I grew so much afterwards, it was like, you realize how inexperienced you are, I think there's a lot of that in that, and there's that aspect to the Fool too, and here, connect your own life to the cards. That's something hugely important you should do, so I'm kind of glad I did that there. That kind of wraps up the symbolism of the Fool, though, so just to kind of summarize, the Fool is the higher self. It's about taking a risk. It's about being true to yourself. True to yourself is the phrase I would use for this card. It's know thyself a little more. It's it's an urge to do that. You may not do it yet, but it's also a sense that your journey is you've been through the world and you're coming back out the other side. You are changed and now you are whole again, and you're just being you again. But you may have more to learn. Every ending is a beginning. And that card kind of echoes that idea too. And remember here, the meanings of the Major Arcana are going to be a little richer than the Minor Arcana cards. Simply because they're all about the higher self and there's no court cards. It's all kind of wrapped up in one. I'm not going to touch on every meaning of the card, just the cards that really tell the story. If you find new or interesting meanings, and I'm sure you'll have meanings come up that jump out at you in certain readings, especially for yourself, when you're like, oh, that card's telling me something new that I hadn't considered before. Every time you do a reading, you learn something. So just remember there, go look up more information if you want it, but I think that's a pretty good understanding of what the Fool is, represents, and there's another verb there that I'm sure I could use, but I can't think of it. So, with that said, I'm going to wrap up this video. So, thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, all those sorts of things, please leave me a comment below and let's discuss and see what we learned from each other. So, thank you again for watching. Have a very good day. Blessed be.